All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this super awesome panel, but I'm very biased because these are my friends. So we're the San Francisco Amateur Astronomers, and this panel is choosing the best telescope, where we have a panel of excellent observers here to unravel the options for you. Okay. My name is Tina Mata. I'm one of the SFA board members, and just a quick plug. Next month, we have a really excellent lecture coming up by Dr. Alec Filipinko, who is a professor at Cal Berkeley. So that's on June 18th. So same place, 6:30. We'll have the snacks and refreshments outside. So it should be a really, really good one. Okay. So I'm going to start things off. I'm the moderator for tonight, and then I will pass things off to each of our panelists as we go along. Okay. All right, so just some opening remarks to you. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. We've got Anthony Barrera, who'll be talking about binoculars, Rex Bell, who'll be speaking about Dobsonian telescopes, Jason Griesbach talking about the digital scopes, and Nick Grundy doing a complicated name, Nick. I don't know what it is. We're going to Casper. Right. Yes, reflect. Okay, great. Cool. So before we kick things off, I just wanted to kind of poll the audience to see where everybody's coming from. And you can just shout things out. Don't feel a need to raise your hands. But we'd love to hear a little bit about what your hopes are for astronomy so we can better tailor our discussion as panelists. So if anybody has, some hello, welcome in. So if anybody has, a hope that they have, please, toss it out now so we can guide ourselves. Observing. Yeah, okay, so observing, cool. Yes?
I'm interested in a portable telescope that allow me to take pictures.
Awesome.
Because I live in Mexico, so when I'm down there, the sky is just clear every night. There's no obstacles, nothing to prevent you from capturing galaxies or whatever you intend for. So I need something that's not so bulky because I'm thinking of taking it from here to down there, and that's like 3 days travel.
That's awesome. Okay, so astrophotography, something that's portable and you can travel with. Cool. Yes?
So I currently have a pair of binoculars, 20 lens, and I'm looking to graduate into a telescope. But the Dobsonians are huge just for so something portable and beginner friendly.
Yeah, okay, beginner friendly, a little smaller than the dog. Yes.
We've never had a telescope. We'd like to get one. What do you think a good beginning telescope is, especially children can use?
Awesome. So friendly with kids, friendly for beginners. Cool. All right. Any last hopes? Welcome in. Hello. Yes.
Yeah, so we are not planning to buy a telescope, but we are here to learn about the different kinds of telescopes.
Amazing. All right. So planning to buy. What the heck am I supposed to do? There's so many options. That is exactly what this panel is for. And I also want to just give a little plug. Rex is one of the ambassadors from our club. If you're a club member, we do have a loaner telescope program. So if you pay your, annual dues, there's a whole slate of telescopes. One of them that's here tonight, one of the Dobsonians, that you could take home and try out in case you're deciding between one or two and you want to see which one is the best fit for you, which one you'll actually use. That is an option that the club has. Okay. I feel a little bit like a saleswoman tonight. All right, cool. So, some other things to have in consideration as well is not just the type of astronomy that you'll be doing. Will you be observing, wanting to see planets, the moons, galaxies? Are you trying to photograph? And then other things to keep in mind too are what are your targets? Do you want to see planets? Do you want to see deep space objects? Are you here for wide field views of really gorgeous clusters? So these are some things to consider. Okay. And more considerations. So, like some people already mentioned, storage space is a big one. Are you living in a San Francisco apartment and it's kind of small? You need something that's not going to take up a ton of space. Or are you planning to take it out camping with you and there's only so much space for your gear. Those are pretty big or really important considerations. Other things are also weight and size. This is an age-friendly hobby, right? If you can do astronomy at any age, if you're a child, if you're an adult, if you're retired, but we do want to keep in mind, if you look at the size of the Dobsonian, that's pretty hefty. So you want to be thinking about those considerations. Is it portable? Can I take it with me on a backpacking trip? And am I worried about injuries if I were to lift something a little too heavy? And then lastly, if you're new to the hobby, how much do we want to actually invest right off the bat? Do we want to start off with binoculars as an intro? Are we looking to go big right away, or do we want to pace ourselves a little bit? So sometimes budget is a consideration. Okay, awesome. So with that, we're going to hand things off to Anthony for binoculars.
Thank you, Tina. So if the best telescope is the one that you use the most, this is my best pair of telescopes. Looking at the world through both eyes works better than just one. Binoculars are small and light, very quick and easy to use. They have a much larger field of view than the telescope, and they show a correct image. What you see through the eyepieces is oriented the same way it is out in the world. It's not upside down, a mirror image, so it's easier to get oriented to what you're seeing. Binoculars are relatively inexpensive, and if you already have a pair that you use during the day, you can also look through them at night. To learn the night sky, spend 2 years looking at everything that you can see through binoculars. Learn the constellations, get to know the moon, follow the planets, get someplace dark and explore the Milky Way, and observe the brighter star clusters, nebulas, and galaxies. Next slide, please. So binoculars have front lenses that gather and focus light. You've got prisms on the inside that orient the image correctly. And they've got more lenses in the eyepieces that make the image look bigger. There's 2 basic binocular designs that are commonly used today. These are Porro prisms. They were invented in 1850 by the Italian optical engineer Ignazio Porro. So I actually learned something while I was preparing this little talk. Ignazio Porro, 1850. Next slide, please. These are roof prisms. They were not invented by somebody named Ruth. The prisms are folded up in the roof of each barrel. So I'm going to set the mic down for a moment. And hopefully everybody can still hear me. So roof prisms are smaller. Oh, thanks, Jason. That helps. Roof prisms are smaller and lighter than Porros. Thank you. Good. See, that was it. Yeah. They're also optically and mechanically more complicated. So a cheap pair of roof prisms is going to have problems, and a good pair of roof prisms is going to cost a little bit more than a good pair of Porros. Porros put the front lenses farther apart, so you get a slightly more three-dimensional view, and they're easier to mount on a tripod. Next slide, please. So binoculars are specified by 2 numbers, magnification and the diameter of the front lenses in millimeters. These are 10 by 50. And these are 8 by 42. So these magnify 10 times, and the front lenses are 50 millimeters across. These magnify 8 times, and the front lenses are 42 millimeters across. Bigger lenses, bigger front lenses, gather more light, so you can see dimmer things and everything looks brighter. But bigger lenses are also heavier, makes the whole binoculars heavier, and they're harder to hold steady. Magnification is also a trade-off. Higher magnification shows you more detail. But as the magnification increases, the field of view gets smaller, so you're looking at less sky at one time. And in addition to magnifying what you're looking at, you're also magnifying your resting tremor. So at higher magnification, the image jiggles more. Excuse me. For handheld nighttime sky watching, I would recommend something between 7 by 35 and 10 by 50. Smaller than 35 millimeter lenses doesn't gather much light, and bigger than 50 millimeters is heavy and hard to hold steady. Bigger than 50 millimeters, I think, needs to be mounted on a tripod. Although some people are like rocks and able to hold bigger binoculars steady. The biggest problem with binoculars is that you can't hold them perfectly steady. There's always some jiggle. Since 1990, some binoculars have had image stabilization. These binoculars have a motion sensor and motors that move lenses to compensate for how the binoculars are moving. So at the push of a button, a little green light, the view is as steady as if they were mounted on a tripod. It's amazing technology. Image stabilized binoculars are a little bit bigger and heavier than they would be without that technology, and much more expensive. I use mine all the time, and I love them, day and night. So that's a few words about the binoculars themselves. One real important thing when you're looking up in the sky, have something to lie down on so you can look up without hurting your neck. It makes all the difference in the world. So that's a few words about binoculars. There's a lot more technical stuff about the kinds of glass and optical coatings and a lot of details that you want to look into if you're selecting binoculars, but hopefully that's an overview that kind of gets you in the ballpark. Thanks very much.
Next is refractors, which can we have
Do you want to come on first?
Yeah, I'll walk through. Hi, everybody. I'm going to step in and talk about refractors, and didn't read these slides yet, so we're going to go on the discovery together. Yeah.
Apologies, we had a vacancy tonight in the last meeting, so Nick is.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, my familiarity with refractors, I've had a lot of them. I have some of them here, and what that means is really this is the original telescope going back to Galileo, right? This is a lens in a tube passing light through. What you're going to see is that they're typically smaller than some of the other telescopes, the Dobsonian here, some of the other ones. This is over here, this little white one is a refractor, about 70 millimeters. They travel really well. You can put it in your backpack, you can fly it on a plane. They hold up amazingly well, especially in comparison to some of the larger mirror-based or reflector telescopes. And you get a clear obstruction preview. So there's nothing, your refractor is a glass lens. There's nothing else inside of it, and it's in your way. So no crossbars, no spikes and other things, then it's going to distort the view that you're going to see through them. The note on the cheapest of those refractors, there are some cheap refractors. You'll see them like you go like Target and see the National Geographic ones in there. Don't get those. I agree with that. But they can get very expensive too. Go ahead. So one of the things, I guess, my favorite thing about refractors is they are portable, they are light, they're intuitive. I guess you're going to point at something and you're going to see it. There's going to be no like typical distortions there. They're often going to be they're going to be shorter focal length, so you're going to have a much wider view typically than some of the like this C8 that's over here, Jason's. It's going to be much longer focal length. So what he was talking when Anthony's talking about binoculars, your narrow field of view, high detail refractors, and a lot of the refractors are often going to be wider fields of view, larger pieces of the sky. You can get into the architecture of different refractors. You're going to hear like apochromatic. You're going to hear doublet, triplet, quadruplet, quintuplet as you get into all sorts of different refractors. Really, that's just their way of stacking lenses to correct for defects in some of the primary ones. So you'll have one or two, oftentimes, to correct images. So like this one here is double. So it's a 2-lens system with fluoride as one of the glass elements. So you'll hear those kind of terms. You'll hear a lot about, I don't know how many you guys, do you know F ratios? You talk about fast telescopes or slow telescopes. Oftentimes the refractors are going to be somewhere in the middle. But that just means how fast it collects light, right? So a very fast telescope is a large bucket coming back down to a single point. A slower one is going to be a very long, skinny one that's a narrow field of view and collects light a lot slower, but at a higher magnification typically. Go ahead, Jim. The bad. Okay. I have a sort of unusual path to astronomy. I started in imaging before I got into observing. So what Anthony mentioned about reversing the field of view and then invert it never bothered me at all because you just flip the screen and just do the software and it's no big deal. But that is a big deal in refractors. You can find yourself kind of lost navigating the sky with your eye buried in the eyepiece when things are misaligned. When up is down, left is right, and flipped. One of the you won't see them larger than 6 inches, maybe 5 inches typically. It's pretty large. I think it's get like 140 millimeter at home, and they get really heavy really fast. I guess all of them do. I guess that's fair, right? But they're bigger is the better, right? Of course. I mentioned chromatic aberrations. Refractors and lenses typically will have distorted effects toward the edges. The center can often be a very sharp image, and as you get to a larger field of view, what they call off-axis, stars and colors can be somewhat distorted, and that's the reason for stacking some of the lenses. It corrects some of those color distortions and shapes. Let's see, collimation. If you haven't had a telescope yet, and you don't know what collimation is, it's great. It's not that fun, but they don't usually require them. Collimation is the alignment you would go through. So as we get to Newtonians and Rex is going to cover that or something like that. But refractors are usually free of collimation once you get into very serious, large-scale things. The triplets, the more glass you have, they can typically be heavier. But that's not always true. A nice 70-millimeter refractor, this thing you guys can feel later, is, I don't know, 3 pounds, 4 pounds, something like that. And the aperture fever, that's real. It's a health risk for I think everybody up here. Yeah, it's always, well, if you have 70, what's 90? What do you see with 110, 200, and it just keeps going on and on. Yeah, your garage is full of that. Go ahead. Oh, there we go. That's the refractors.
So my name's Rex, and I'm going to talk about Newtonian reflecting telescopes. And the story is not complete without just a brief introduction of these two gentlemen here. The guy on the left is Isaac Newton, and there he is splitting light into its various wavelengths with a prism. He gave us the laws of classical physics and also invented the Newtonian reflecting telescope, of which I'm going to describe. The guy on the right is John Dobson. And John Dobson was a UC Berkeley educated chemist. When he graduated from college in 1944, he went to work for the Manhattan Project and didn't know that they were working on making a bomb. And when he learned they were making a bomb, he abruptly quit and joined a group of Vedantic monks and became a monk himself at a monastery. And then in the 1950s, he borrowed a telescope that a friend of his had, and it changed his life. And when he looked through that telescope, he said to himself, everybody needs to see what I'm seeing now. So what he did was he popularized astronomy by developing a simple but revolutionary mount called the Dobsonian mount, is what we call it today. And what it did was it allowed the amateur astronomer to have a very large telescope that was mounted very simply, with which you could see a lot of stuff. Next slide. So this is the basic principle of a Newtonian reflecting telescope. It's rather simple. It's sort of counterintuitive because the eyepiece, as you see, is up near the front. As we're a refractor like this, it's in the back. But the way this works is light comes in the tube, in the front of the tube, hits a concave mirror. It uses a mirror to magnify, not a lens. Hits the concave mirror. Since the mirror is concave, it focuses the image as a cone. The image comes up, hits that small diagonal mirror, which is flat, and then is angled at 90 degrees into an eyepiece. And that's how this thing functions. This tube, this diagram, represents the tube of the telescope, which is essentially this part here. And it can be mounted in two primary ways. There's more than two, but two primary ways that we generally see. It can be mounted equatorially, which I will explain, or alt-azimuthally, which I will also explain. Dobson mounts are exclusively alt-azimuth. Next slide. So what are the advantages of a Newtonian telescope? They're the most economical. You get the most bang for your buck. You get a powerful telescope for relatively low cost compared to other types of instruments. It's probably the best type for beginners because it's relatively simple. Doesn't have a lot of gadgets and gizmos, is not complicated to operate. It comes in a wide variety of sizes. Because of the mount, you can get them anywhere from 4 inches up to 30 inches. 30 inches is rare, but you can still get them. And they're common in sizes like 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So they come in a wide variety of sizes to suit the needs of what your intention is. They're simple to use and simple to set up. They have a lot of light gathering and magnification capability. So they'll show you a good detailed bright image. They are great for visual astronomy. They're a little less beneficial for photography because of the way they're mounted, although certain ones can be used for photography. And they're also the easiest type of telescope to build yourself if you want to build a telescope. Next slide. So what are the disadvantages? They're often heavy and they're big, and sometimes they're difficult to transport. So when you're buying a telescope, you need to ask yourself, will it fit in my car? Do I have the storage room at home for the thing? And you buy one that is commensurate with the space that you have. They often require what's called collimation to set up. So as you're driving around in your car up to Mount Tamalpais or wherever you're going, if the telescope is banging around, sometimes the mirrors get a little bit out of alignment, and what you need to do to form a proper image is you need to line those mirrors up. So the first thing I do when I set up my telescope, my Newtonian reflector, is I make sure that the mirrors are lined up. And it's not that hard to do, it just takes a little bit of getting used to. The other thing is, without a motorized drive, some telescopes have a motorized drive, so they essentially counter the motion of the Earth so that the object stays centered in the field of view. Many Newtonians, some have motorized drives, but many don't, especially some of the Dobbs. And so without a motorized drive, one of the disadvantages is you have to keep moving the telescope to keep the object in the field of view. When I'm up at Mount Tam and I'm using my large Dobsonian to show people, between people, I have to get up there and readjust it to make sure that the object is in the center so the next person coming along can see it. And they're not the best for terrestrial viewing because the image is inverted. It's a mirror, so it's going to look upside down and backwards. So they're not great for terrestrial viewing. Next slide. So they're mounted, the Newtonian telescope is mounted on two different types of mounts, essentially. This one here on the left is the classic equatorial mount. And the benefit of that mount is it lines up so that you only have to move it in one direction, left or right. Once you get it set in position incorrectly, and it only moves left or right to be able to track an object. So that's relatively easy. The Dobsonian there on the right has an alt-azimuth mount. Alt is up and down, and azimuth is left and right. So you have to move it in two directions to track an object. You can move it diagonally, but you're still moving it essentially in two directions. So the alt-azimuth has a little bit of a disadvantage over the polar, the equatorial mount, because the equatorial mount follows the object a little bit better. They come in a variety of sizes, as I said, and what's that last thing say there? Oh yeah, most modern large Newtonians are Dobsonian telescopes. Mainly for the reason that mounting a large telescope on this equatorial type of mount, which has a big counterweight on it, gets to be impractical. It gets to be really heavy and sort of impractical to move. So the thing that the Dobsonian gives you is it gives you an opportunity for a large telescope on that alt-azimuth mount. Next slide. So here's the advantages and disadvantages of the two types of mounts. So we have a Newtonian tube. You can have it on a Dobsonian mount or on an equatorial mount. The advantages of the Dobbs, they're relatively cheap. They're not that expensive. They're very easy to set up. You just put it on the ground and you plop the tube on the mount. And they're suitable, as I said, for larger mirrors. The disadvantages are you have to move it in two directions, as I said, to track the object. They need a special setup, which I'm not going to get into, for automatic tracking. Most of the Dobsonians that you'll see do not track automatically, although you can get these gizmos called go-to, which you press a certain series of buttons and it'll take you to the object you want. That takes a little bit of time to set up, and it's not very easy, and sometimes it just distracts from your observing time because you're fiddling with the electronics. And again, they're not really suitable for astrophotography. So the equatorial mounts, the benefit is, as I mentioned, once you have it set up properly, it only moves in one direction, and that makes it easy to track your object. Those are often equipped with motorized drives that keep the object in view and are therefore suitable for astrophotography. The cons of the equatorial are they tend to be expensive. They require a large counterweight to balance the telescope, as I said. They can be heavy and less portable. They require polar alignment, so in order to get it set up and working properly, you have to align it with the pole star. That's not that hard to do, but it just takes a little bit of practice. And they're not really practical. Those mounts are not really practical for large mirrors. Next one. So here's some examples of Newtonian telescopes. So the first one is an equatorial mounted, that looks like probably about a 6-inch It's a rather small telescope, short focal length. Then the one in the middle there is probably about a 10 or 12 inch Dobsonian. So you can see these curved structures here. They're called bearings. They move up and down, and then the mount on which it sits has a turntable on the bottom that allows it to move left and right. And the one there on the right that's my homemade 18-inch Dobsonian. It's a truss type telescope, so it's not a solid tube because it would be too heavy. It's so big, the thing is like 7.5 feet long. So it comes apart and it's held together with those tubes there. Next slide. So which one, if you want a Newtonian telescope, because there's a lot of stuff on this slide, I know, but if you want a Newtonian, which one should you choose? So visual astronomy, they're better for visual astronomy, and if storage and transport is not an issue, get a moderately sized Dobsonian. Don't get a small 6-inch one. Get a bigger one, 8 inches or larger. With an 8-inch mirror or larger, you're able to see a lot more, and it will probably be one that you use a lot more because you'll enjoy it. If you're interested in the moon and the planets, you choose what's called a longer focal length. So a longer focal length gives you a narrower field of view, but it gives you a little bit more magnification given the size of your mirror. If you're more interested in deep sky objects like galaxies and nebulae and star clusters, get a larger mirror. A 10-inch mirror or greater is recommended. You need a big mirror to gather a lot of light because these objects are faint. So a bigger mirror is what you would want in a focal length of about f4 or f4.5. Choose a low power eyepiece, about 25 millimeter, and a medium power eyepiece. These provide greater clarity. People tend to think, oh, I'm going to get a telescope with a super high power eyepiece so I can see everything. Well, you'll end up seeing nothing because a super high power eyepiece magnifies everything, including distortion. So when you're looking at a planet, let's say we're looking at it at 300 power, if the conditions in the atmosphere are not perfect, you're just going to see a blurry blob. So it's better to get a lower power eyepiece and a medium power eyepiece with a relatively large mirror. That will give you the best images and the best detail. Unless you're tech savvy, and a lot of people are, I'm not, stay away from gadgets and gizmos like the go-to things. If you want a basic Newtonian Dob, get something that forces you to learn the sky. Don't get something where you think you can push a button and it'll take you right to the Andromeda Galaxy and then right to the Orion Nebula. It seldom really works out that way. The best thing for you to do in astronomy is learn the sky and learn where the objects are and learn how to point the telescope to find those objects. If you're ambitious, make your own. I mean, telescopes can be made. You can make your own mirror. You can start with a relatively small mirror, like a 6-inch or an 8-inch, and it's very rewarding to make your own mirror, although it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of perseverance and a lot of time, but it can be done. Then down there at the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see all this, but these are roughly the costs of Newtonian telescope, basically the Dobsonian Newtonians. So an 8-inch will run you somewhere between $600 and $800 bucks. 10-inch, 800 to 1200, a 12-inch, 1200 to 2000, and a 16-inch, 2400 and up. Those are for new telescopes. You can often find secondhand telescopes that are probably half that price because someone bought a telescope thinking they would use it and it just sits in the garage collecting dust and they want to unload it. So you can get secondhand telescopes that are in decent shape for a lot less than that. I think that's the end of my, yeah, that's
I'm back. We're going to talk about Cassegrain telescopes. So that's the, I had to look this one up too. It's just Laurent Cassegrain, so French inventor of design for folded optics. So what this means is that we have a mirror, primary mirror in the back here, and then it bounces to the front. We have a secondary mirror, and then back out the center of that primary. So we've got a hole in the primary you are going to get anywhere from 6 inches, I think there's a 5 inch too, up to about 14 inches. That's about the largest I've ever seen, and they're the size of prime emitters. So they're going to be often bigger, similar to the Newtonians and the Dobsonians, not like the refractors. Refractors kind of live off of that point. You also have these stuff, Schmidt Cassegrain, SCT. You don't have to remember these things. It won't be quizzing you. The SCTs, the Maxitovs, the Rishikrishians. So these different designs, they have nearly different sort of use cases, and there's some different fundamentals about each one. So I'll just kind of cover those so you get some idea. Go ahead, Tim. So this is the most common. This is a very popular telescope. Like this 8-inch SCT over here, you're going to see hundreds of them. One of the largest companies, Celestron, their bread and butter is making an 8-inch SCT, and that's because they're very versatile. So they're long focal length. You get a high amount of magnification. They collect the light. Usually they're around f10, which is kind of slow, which is okay. You can modify them, but they're great, powerful, and light for what they can do. So I think an 8-inch SCT probably weighs about 12 or 13 pounds, which is kind of, an 8-inch refractor would be about 60 or so. So it gives you an idea of the light collection they can do. They're going to be really good at bright objects for sure. Moon, planets, they're excellent. You will have them used in deep sky as well, but you're going to have to do some modifications like we did that. So you want to what's called a reducer or something like that to make them a little bit faster, collect a little more light, see a little bit larger amount of sky. The collimation, probably not as much as that's the alignment. Not as much as a Newtonian typically, but still happens, and you still have to deal with it. And if you get a faucet down there, it's not the worst thing in the world. But this is definitely the most common. This is characterized by what's called the Schmidt corrector plate. So it's this front plate that's going to correct some of the aberrations and coma that's inherent in the design. So each of these designs will have a corrector or no corrector at all. That's what differentiates them. Go ahead, Tim. Maksutov Cassegrain. So this is named after Maksutov. But the difference here is that there's a really thick meniscus corrector plate up front. So what you can see here on this Skywatcher telescope is this sort of curved front end that's a little bit heavier. These are going to be really good with contrast. They usually give you a longer focal length. I've got one of these here. It's a tiny little one. It's not amazing, but it's awesome for lunar viewing. And you put it on a small tripod or something, and you can just go out and stare at things. And it's very rewarding on bright objects. You're not going to try to do deep sky typically on these things because it collects light very slowly. But it gives great views, high contrast view. So there's, yeah, that's the Maxitovs. Go ahead. Ricicretians. This is the Hubble Space Telescope design. So, if you guys are ambitious for the first scope, that's where you can go. But this is mainly astrophotography. So if imaging is the way you go, I would not recommend this for anyone to buy as their first scope. I don't know if anyone has bought one of the first scope. They probably regret it. It's a bit fussy. So it does great images. You can get a lot out of them. But in terms of if you get it as your first scope, it might make you want to stop imaging. It's really tough. I had one for a while and I sold it and got something easier for a while ago. But they have they have very little aberrations or coma because of the way the mirror designs are. And go ahead. This was just a chart slapped together. It kind of gives you an idea of weight. For me, I'm not that big, but I don't want to carry gigantic telescopes. When you talk about some of the scopes are like 50, 60 pounds, I will take it outside in the backyard and look at things. But I'm going to do a lot less if it's like 50 pounds. There's a threshold for me to conveniently bring out there. Like Anthony said, it's the one you use the most, and you don't always know what it is. You get really ambitious. You want a 14-inch telescope because you're going to see some amazing things. That one time that you can manage to get a lift it outside and get it set up. But if you get a 4 or 5 hour window of clear sky, you may not get it out because it's just so much trouble. So the weight is a real impact there. So you can see kind of how the aperture relates to the weight of these. Cost is the other factor, right? So there's these, I don't know, inflection points where they're very common, telescopes, common sizes, and then you get to these extremes where you're going to be a lot more for say, C14 up there on the top. But that's, it's relative. I think it's a big factor. I think when you're selecting a telescope you actually want to buy. And I think there you go. Jason?
Soon we'll be stopping for questions. But one of the advantages of having several of us up here is you can get to review points. These guys were heckling me. I'm serious. These guys were heckling me, especially when anything came up like, you don't want those digital gadgets. You just need 2 years to study the sky and stay away from all those electronics. Okay, I'm coming in with a slightly different viewpoint here. All right, so let's go to the next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, previous slide. I forgot what it was. So the telescopes give us a wonderful window into the universe. It's amazing. And this diagram down at the bottom. Imagine that, okay, it'd be better if we were pointing up, but imagine the light from the universe is coming from the right into your telescope and it giving you this beautiful window into the universe. What we're going to do is we're going to block that window off and put a camera there. Why? And then we're going to put a computer behind it, and then we're going to put a display behind it. And why wouldn't you ever do that? I mean, if you had a one-bedroom apartment with only one window in it, would you cover up that window with a TV and put a camera on the other side? Just so you can see what the camera thinks it looks like outside? Why would you do that? Well, there are actually two very fundamental reasons. One is that when the telescope knows what it's looking at, it makes it arguably much easier to find your way around the night sky. Because guess what? I can't just put into the keypad Andromeda and it goes there. I kind of like that personally. The second reason why I like this arrangement here is I'm going to show on the very next slide. See, telescopes are generally good. Is it advancing? Oh, thank you. Perfect. Telescopes generally make things look bigger, not brighter. There's a wiggle room in that statement. It's a broad statement, but I'm still going to stick with it. It makes things bigger, not brighter. And much of what we want to look at in the night sky is very, very dim. Our eyes are limited. Our eyes have fantastic dynamic range, but they do have limitations in very low light conditions. Just as an example, on the left is what I'm trying to show what the Rosette Nebula would look like through an optical telescope. And it's a beautiful structure. In the middle, there's a clump of stars surrounded by glowing gas all around it. That gas, which is glowing red, is what is compressing down and forming those stars in the center. Now, unfortunately, although you can tell that story, you can't exactly see it because it's too dim. Now, on the right, if you advance, please, yeah, it'll just go. We're seeing what's called live stacking, where a digital telescope says, oh, first we can see the stars in the middle, the camera continues to gather more light, and the image gets brighter as it gathers more light. Now you can see the red glowing around it because the camera is not limited by our finite human vision, and it gets brighter and brighter, and now we can see, you may have missed it at the end, but in the center of this cloud of gas, there's a hole in it. There's a hole in it because that's the stars that were born in the center of that cloud of gas ate up all that gas in the middle. And that's why there's a hole there. It's like the cloud of gas sacrifice its inside to make those stars. I think it's an amazing story. And you can start to get that depth with the digital telescope because it does that stacking for you and it tells you a more progressive story. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the experience. What do you think of when you're observing under the night sky? Are you going to be that person on the left who is underneath the array of stars just gazing up in wonder? Or are you going to be the person on the right with the soft glow of a laptop screen illuminating your face? I mean, this is a serious question. Is this what you want? Because digital telescopes need screens. None of our brains have Wi-Fi implants in them. At least not in this one. So this is the reality. Is this the experience that you want? Although it's great to be able to show off these great pictures, are you going to say, "Hey kids, come on, get off your phones, come outside and observe with me"? What are we going to observe? My phone. I'm sorry. It's a reality though. Let's look at, yes, please. We're going to look at just a couple different models, types of smart telescopes out there. And this is only a few of them. There are several others. The Seastar is the most economical that I know of. It's about $400. And their PR material is wonderful. I mean, they show you all these majestic views. In fact, they even show one of the people going up, looking up in amazement. And they show like a digital overlay, like they're looking into some 3D holographic view. But no, the reality is you're looking at your phone. Because all of these telescopes come with an app, and you're going to either display the output of that app on your tablet or on your phone. However, it's a great way to start, and you can see a lot. So now let's talk about another telescope, the EV scope by Unistar. Notice that it has an eyepiece. That's kind of clever. And when you look into the eyepiece, you can see this image materialize. Yes, it is still a display, but they're clever enough to hide their display inside of an eyepiece. So you still get the experience of looking into a telescope. You are still looking at a screen, but it doesn't feel like you're looking at a phone. It feels like you're observing through a telescope. So it comes to the price too, $4,500 for this one. So it's a little bit more than the Seastar. And then finally, I'm sure many of you have been to star parties. You've seen someone like this individual on the right. It comes in with the telescope on his trailer. I really doubt that person wants to throw away their $30,000 trailer of optical power, pure optical power, because you have such a large aperture. Why can't we combine that with the smart digital technology? What would happen if you could? Well, we can't exactly know that yet, but Pegasus has made a new product on the left called the Smart Eye, which is very clever. We've been waiting for this for years, and we believe it's going to come up next month. Basically, instead of making the telescope smart, they're making the eyepiece smart. They're building the camera, the computer, and the display all inside of an eyepiece. So you could take the small eyepiece and put it even in that large monstrous telescope and turn it into a smart telescope. That sounds really cool to me. And you'll be able to see in full color with that much optical power. You'll be able to see full color that much faster. And this eyepiece, once it's available, will be around $1,700. So that's really compelling.
That's not a lot more than you would spend for the most expensive glass eyepiece.
Right. So pros and cons of this type of technology: more color and detail. You're not limited by human vision. You get a more dynamic viewing experience. You can set up at the press of a button because the telescope can just look up, know where it's pointing, and you're set. And it's a great starting point for astrophotography. But now, cons, let's be realistic. Do you want a telescope that you have to charge every time? Do you want a telescope where you have to update the app and update firmware? You are still going to be looking at a screen, and that screen is going to lack the dynamic range of human vision. And next year, they're probably going to come out with a better one. So, that's really this is not for everyone. It's a very unique niche market, and I find it really exciting because there's so much happening every year, but it is definitely not for everyone.
Amazing. Okay, so I have some closing remarks before we jump into questions, okay? First of all, I just want to say welcome. You're so smart and cool. You chose such a great hobby in astronomy. Welcome to the club, and if you're not a member, you should join our club too, so you can literally be part of our club. So this is a fabulous, fabulous hobby to embark on, and it's going to be a really fun adventure for you and for your family and your friends and whoever you share this with, because astronomy really does provide an opportunity to share the cosmos with other people, right? If you get the smart telescope, it's a little bit like a like a fun dinner party trick, like, oh hey, let's go outside. Like I'm gonna open up like I have my Vespera, so I don't have it's kind of like a midpoint place, but you know, you can bring it out and you're at the park on a picnic and you do solar astronomy and image things. You are showing it on your phone, but it's still very impressive. Or you have the Dobsonian, and now we have a car limit and not a person limit for our star parties. So you get to, you know, maybe get invited with somebody in the club and you get to go around and look through a Dobsonian or look through a reflector. So you can share this with so many people, and you can also volunteer and do outreach. Our club does a lot of outreach with schools, with different community organizations. We're out with the community at our public star parties. So really you get to share a lot of your knowledge as you build it up, and a lot of really cool images. So this is what I call the beginner astronomy starter pack, where I think many beginner astronomers should obviously begin. So first you're gonna want some sort of intro text. I've got a couple over there. There's like Turn Left at Orion. There's Night Watch. These are written like, you know, middle to high school type of reading level, super easy to understand. They kind of go through different sections of, you know, welcome to the hobby. Like, here's what it's like to look from your backyard. Here's, you know, season by season guide, star charts, stuff like that. If you want a more intense star chart, there's always like the Audubon Society's Guide to the Night Sky. That's going to be way more detailed, but a lot of fun too. Of course, there are a lot of apps online. There's Astrophyrics, so you can know what the weather is like. There's various apps. You can just look in the App Store. These are like common icons. But if you just look in your App Store, look for astronomy apps, things will come up so that as you're getting used to the night sky, as Anthony alluded to, it takes a while to kind of get used to what season am I in, what time of night is it, where are things positioned in the sky, where's the Big Dipper, and then I jump over here, and so on and so forth. That's called star hopping, and these texts, I would say, are really good intros to getting used to that star hopping. So you know what constellation you start at, which way to jump from there, what's going to be in the sky. But every now and then we all need a little help, and so these apps can be a really great place to start. You can kind of point and figure out what constellation is that. If you're out at the park on an evening walk and you kind of see like, that looks like a shape, what is that? Pull out the app so you can see what it is and start to orient yourself. And again, as Anthony alluded to, you want to be comfy, right? Like you want it, you know, the night is long, and the comfier you are, the more observing you'll be able to do. So if you're at Mount Tam with us for a star party, it's chilly. If you're out at a public star party in the Presidio, it's very, very windy. So you want to wear your layers, you want to be warm, you want to have a blanket. My favorite thing to do, so this is like personal plug of my favorite way to observe, is with the like zero gravity chair. So you can kind of lay down on a really comfy chair, be, you know, no strain on your neck, looking right up. And my favorite thing to do is orient myself, where are my constellations, hop around a little bit, and then kind of look around of like, is there anything fuzzy anywhere? Is there a little bright spot, right? Because usually when you can see that with your naked eye, chances are if you pull out the binoculars, you see a gorgeous star cluster. And then you're just like, whoa, this is amazing. And that's my favorite thing to do, so that's a very selfish plug for getting a zero gravity chair. And last but not least, a red light headlamp. Once you're night adjusted and your eyes are kind of used to, I can take in so much more because I'm not, you know, having screens around. You are going to need to, you know, change lenses on your telescope or do something like that. Get yourself a red light headlamp. That way you don't have to keep readjusting because you pull out your phone and like bring out a flashlight. And if you're at a star party, no one's going to be upset with you because you kind of took their night vision away too. Okay. So this is what I would call the starter pack. And then now, you know, we can open this up for questions to the panel. I think, you know, some things that were asked along the way, if I'm remembering, you know, for the gentleman who wants to travel with something light and do astrophotography, you might be in the market for a sea star. Like that might be a good place to start if you're willing to make that type of investment. Best for young kids, I think we can probably pass this around. I'm biased. I would say a Dobsonian. I think Dobsonians are friendly for, you know, all beginners. But if you're thinking about what does a child know in the night sky, they know the moon, they know Saturn, they know Mars, they know some of the planets, and you can see those with a Dobsonian to some level of like detail. scale. So that's a really great place to start, I would say. But does anybody else want to chime in on what's a good place to start for kids? Because I know that was, if we're starting off for beginners, we're a family, what's going to be intuitive? Yeah.
I've got 5 and a 10-year-old, so I figured that's gives me some credibility there. It depends. It really does depend on what age. So my 5-year-old, I sort of have to keep him away from it or hold him up to see whatever it is he's going to see, and that's kind of where I stop. When I think about 7 or 8 years old, you start to get an appreciation of like, don't destroy whatever dad is doing out there. The 10-year-old, I was able to set up with that mount last time we went camping, and he was able to operate it and look through things, and he had a great time for about 30 minutes, and then moved on to whatever they were going to do after that. But that's 30 minutes of observing what he's able to do. I would say something small and light, and don't overinvest at that age. You don't need anything heavy. You want something that if something happens, you're not going to cry if it breaks or something like that. I think you don't give them your fanciest eyepiece, things like that, because they will drop them, as I've cried. So,
I don't know if they still make them, but there's a little Newtonian called an Astroscan, and the base of it is a ball that sits in a cradle, so you can rotate it in any direction, and it's like a 4.5-inch lens in there. So it's really light, short focal length, has a wide field of view. The optics are not great, but you can see the moon, you can see the rings of Saturn, you can see star clusters, and it's indestructible and totally intuitive to use. I think an Astroscan is a wonderful thing for a child. And unless they like pick it up and throw it, they can't break it.
What sort of reach do you get with this sort of model telescope? Do you get to see Saturn and Jupiter and the moons of Jupiter?
So that's a 70-millimeter refractor. In terms of reach, I think it's about 400 millimeters in focal length, so it's fairly wide in field. You're going to see, you can see Saturn. It's going to be smaller. So any of the refractors like this, if you do visual, you're going to be. It's a function of the eyepiece, right? So you take your focal length divided by the size of the eyepiece, and that's the level of magnification. So something like this, you can put in a 10-millimeter eyepiece, and you're going to see Saturn. You will be able to make out that it is Saturn. Yeah, you'll see the shape of the rings. It depends obviously on the conditions, but you're not going to get those massive close-up views that you want. I mean, you're going to get like the Schmidt-Cassegrains. Comparably, you're going to get it. Yeah.
Fills the evening, for distraction and see the planets with your own eye.
Yeah, it definitely accommodates it. I think I don't know more so than what telescope. Mounts are often important. So this is a fairly inexpensive mount. It's just a manual mount. It's all TASMA oriented, so it's up and down, left and right. It doesn't track. So those are kind of important things, because with that telescope and that mount, you're going to have to guide yourself to whatever object it is, and you're going to spend time doing that. Whereas a tracking mount or something like that, or you mentioned the Seastar, which is kind of the first thing that comes to mind when you were talking about travel. You're going to have a go-to ability. So when you go out for an observing session, and even though it's via the screen, you get a lot of benefits that way, but you'll also be able to see many more objects out there. And so, I mean, yeah, I love this setup. I'm very used to the setup, but I think Seastar is a really good way to get into, seeing the night sky. I don't think, I know a lot of people who have them. I don't know, they often graduate and buy something more and sell them. But I don't know anyone that regretted getting them, and I think they're cool little devices. So.
How much does the Seastar run? And once you have it, how long will you be able to use it before you have to get it repaired? And how long? Are repairs usually expensive? Just the maintenance and upkeep?
I don't have one. My neighbor has one, and I've I know we have several of them.
I
Have
have a Vespera.
yeah.
Yeah.
I could pull my chair. So I have a Vesper that's set up right in front of you, Binky, and I can bring that out later. A Vesper is a bit more expensive than a Sea Star. So the Sea Star can start in like the 400 range. I remember when we were shopping around for a digital smart telescope, we all even saw some that were used in like the 250 to 300 range, if that's sounding right to everybody else. As far as I know, everything runs on the app. So you're going to download the app, you're going to connect to the telescope's Wi-Fi, and then you kind of have to take it outside and let it, all kind of like getting polarized, like it has to kind of get set up to know where things are. And then basically just point and shoot. So on the app, you put, I want to see Andromeda Galaxy, and then it does this really cool, like, ooh, where's it going? I'm right here. And then it starts, the longer that you leave it set up, the more the image is going to like clarify and get brighter and brighter. Um, we've had the Vespera now, we've had terrible weather for about 10 star parties, but we've had the Vespera since January, and I think it's updated once. And it's, the Vespera is in the range of like, I don't know what the more intro level one was, but this is like a mid level and it's about $2,000. So the Sea Star is going to be definitely a lower price range so that you can get used to what does a smart digital telescope do? Do I like this? Is this my type of vibe? I like bringing it out when we're out camping or having it at a dinner party. We can just go out on the balcony and point and shoot to something that's in that general area, and we get to see like a really cool image and share it online and share it with our friends and be like, hey, look at this. Because when you're looking at deep space objects through something like a Dobsonian, you're going to see a fuzzy little ball, right? Which is really cool when you kind of put it together like this is, light years away. The light that's coming has traveled for so long for it to even meet my eye, but I'm not seeing the colors that when I go and look up at what does it look like through the Hubble Space Telescope, that's not what you see through the Dobsonian. But when you kind of put the two together of I see the fuzzy ball, I navigated to it with the Dobsonian, and then I turn on my Vesper or my Sea Star, and then I look at it, then I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty awesome because now I see the fuzzy ball with my naked eye, and then I see my really smart telescope doing lots of work to give me this really cool image. I would imagine that if you started out with a Sea Star, you would have your fun and get your thrills, and then maybe within like a year or two, not because of the telescope itself, but because of your own drive as an astronomer, as you get more into it, you will likely want to upgrade into something that's a little higher, higher quality. But as a beginner, if you're starting out, I think the Sea Star is like a really economical, like intro level type of digital scope. Yep. Yes.
I just want to say that I actually have a Sea Star, so I can
Cool.
well for ship a Sea Star.
So just sort of that, how often do you have to get these repaired or right like most things? Are there service that's required?
I'll say for our Dobsonian, we have an 8-inch. We did a cross country move. We got a little banged up, and we've done one maintenance on it with like veteran club member help, and that's it. And it's been 4 years that we've had it.
But if the question was on the Sea Star or a digital type telescope, sure, it happens to break, but generally maintenance not required. Maybe after years you might need a new battery. I have talked to people who have needed new batteries. That's kind of the extent of what I do.
Yes. So for the refractor portion, if you're looking to get a balance between price, decent quality, you're still a beginner, you want to see a little bit more, what price range should you be looking at, what specs should you be looking at, and what are there used marketplaces for this kind of thing?
Used definitely. Astromarks is one of the very common ones. I bought on Craigslist with some success.
So when my husband and I were on the market for our first telescope, we didn't really know. All we knew was like we love space movies. He had a little refractor as a kid that he really enjoyed using, and that was that was basically what we were starting off with as, very, very novice, amateur astronomers. We called salespeople. So there was this, we looked up like best telescope stores online, and we found High Point Scientific, and that's still where we go to for all of our like telescope stuff. You can actually call them and they have really great salespeople who will help you and explain things. We didn't have like a panel like this. We were kind of just starting off as like, let's give ourselves this for Christmas. And so we called them up and we kind of just spent like 30 minutes on the phone with them telling like, these are the types of things we want to do. We want to observe. We want to see planets and the moon. We've got quite a bit of space. He didn't ask us about the weight. We lived in a third floor walk up, and we got a Dobsonian, 8-inch Dobsonian. So that was a bit of an error. We ended up keeping it in the basement most of the time because it's just so big and heavy to lug the whole way up. But they were really helpful. So I would put a plug in for High Point Scientific. I don't know if anybody else likes them, but they have really, really helpful, knowledgeable like sales team.
Were there other opinions on the refractor specs?
I would say Astromart is probably the best used marketplace that I know of. I can probably check it once a day. Yeah, and then
Cloudy night.
yeah, Cloudy Nights is another one. Cloudy Nights is really popular for its forums, right? So there's a lot of answers, a lot of individuals, a lot of feisty conversations sometimes. But yeah, they also have a used marketplace. Um, One of the club members, Aki's really good. He kind of told me this concept at one point that a lot of these things are assets, right? They don't tend to depreciate rapidly. So, some say if you spend $1,000 on a telescope, you might use it for a year. Maybe you'll sell it for 900 or even 1,000. So, if you take good care of them, that's kind of a consistent way. And that was a great rationale for me to buy more stuff. So.
Specifically for refractors, they get bigger and more unwieldy quickly based on aperture. I had a 127 millimeter triplet refractor, which was a great thing. It was a beautiful instrument, but it was so long that, and I'm a visual observer, I don't take pictures. It was so long that when it was pointed anywhere up, the eyepiece was down here. So it wasn't really practical. I sold it for not a whole lot more than I spent for it. My biggest telescope right now is a 100 millimeter refractor, and that's a real sweet spot for me. I think it's worth it to pay more for an apochromatic triplet. You'll spend a lot less on an achromatic doublet. So apochromatic is just a little bit better optics, and a triplet has 3 objective lenses rather than 2. The way I justify spending more money to me is how many times am I going to use this, and how prorated. If I'm using this, 20 times a year, and it's going to last me for 10 years, I'm not real good at math, but I think that's about 2,000 times. So divide the expense by 2,000, then is it worth it to spend that much money for that much use? And it's total rationalization, but it works for me. I definitely think it's worth it to take the plunge and buy something that's really good, because you're going to love it more and it's going to last longer for you.
Another plug for a loaner telescope program. So again, the loaner telescope program is a really great place to start if you're kind of like, that's a lot of money. I'm not sure I want to invest like a solid quality like 6 to 8 inch Dobsonian. That's going to be like $600 to $800. If you don't want to go for it right away, get a loaner. See, like, do I actually take this out into the backyard, or is it just so big that it hasn't come out of the trunk since I borrowed it from the club? and so much, clarity, just borrow one and kind of figure it out. So that is always an option if you're a member of our club.
I'm curious, Rex, how long did it take you to build your 18-inch Dobsonian?
It took, I didn't make that mirror, so that was relatively easy, but the structure itself, it took me maybe 3 months working on it, casually here and there. To make a mirror, to start from scratch, to make the mirror and the telescope, it'll take you at least 6 months. It's tedious. It's not conceptually or intellectually that difficult. It's just very tedious, and it requires a lot of perseverance. Anyone can do it. I can teach anyone in here to make a mirror. It's not that hard. You just have to stick with it. It tends to get really boring and sort of dry and dull, but you can do it. And if you're excited about it, that will give you the motivation to build the telescope. And when you've built the telescope, you'll be really proud of yourself. It's really it's a great feeling. It's a feeling that, it's like graduating from college or something like that. It's really a good feeling and sense of accomplishment when you build your own telescope. And then when you show people your telescope and they look through it and they ask you, where did you get this? And you say, I made it. You feel really good, and people are impressed. And it's a great thing. The other thing I want to sort of say about astronomy, not about any telescope in particular, is astronomy is more than just looking through a telescope with your eye. It's understanding what you're looking at. And even though in, an optical Dobsonian where you're just using your eye, yeah, things are going to look like a fuzzy patch. But when you stop and think, what is this fuzzy patch that I'm looking at? This thing is 2 million light years away. It consists of 400 billion stars. There may be someone there that's looking back at me right this very moment. That's what really kind of motivates you to get out and look and understand what you're seeing. I don't mean to sort of downplay what some of the other folks have said about the screens and all that, but if you want to see something really cool, just go on the internet and look at the Hubble Space Telescope's view of, various things. You're looking at a screen, although you can say, well, I found it myself and this and that, but to me, there's nothing like visual astronomy, to have the actual photons come into your eye. There's something philosophical about that I just find really.
Rex, I work in mental health, and so I call that feeling celestial wonder. And so you kind of just you're looking up to this thing, and you're just like, oh my goodness. And when you get a book like Night Watch or Turn Left at Orion, the star charts will tell you how many light years away, how many stars it consists of, because nobody automatically downloads this entire astronomy base into their heads. It's knowledge that you accumulate over years, right? And so having a text that explains these things to you, so you can remember these fun facts and kind of, if it's one that you're going to show all the time when you have friends over and you're showing them something through your telescope, you kind of know those facts and you can spout them out, and it's everyone can share in that moment of wow, how here we are on Earth, we're looking through this thing and we're seeing something that's light that's traveled for so long to get to our eyes. And making your mirror, yeah, I've never done it personally. It could be boring or it could be meditative, right? And a great way to cope. Thanks so much. We used to have a workshop way back in the day of folks who would build telescopes. It's kind of not where the club's at right now, but if that's something that is very interesting to you, my understanding is that the East Bay Astronomical Society does have a telescope building sort of program for their members.
It's not just for members. Every Friday, that's
At the Chabot Observatory. Yeah.
So we do have on our Slack channel, we do have a telescope making channel on there where you can ask, if you're interested in telescope making, you can ask questions and people will help you. And people are willing to help you in person too. I mean, if you're hitting an obstacle or you want to know something, you can meet in person with members of the club who are familiar with telescope making, and they'll help you work through issues. They'll even give you parts. I have plenty of glass at home. I've got all kinds of glass if people are interested in grinding your own mirror. I've got abrasives. So, and there's plenty of books on the subject too. You know, when I spoke earlier about John Dobson, he was a Vedantic monk turned amateur astronomer. He lived very simply. He didn't have a lot of possessions, but he was an egotist. And I took a course from him when I was a sophomore in high school. And he was such a terrible personality. I took a course on telescope making that I dropped out of the class. And I never finished my telescope. And then years later, I got a book, and it says, you know, by golly, I'm going to do this. And I got a book by a guy named Richard Berry called Making Your Own Telescope. I followed the instructions of the book, and I completed a 6-inch. And that was really, really rewarding. I had a Celestron 8 at the time. I completed my 6-inch, and maybe I was biased, but I think my 6-inch homemade telescope outperformed my Celestron 8, and I sold my Celestron 8. So, you know, just a plug for telescope making.
Yes.
Next to over here. If your lights have been used, is it a concern about like, is it properly lined, or you know, do you ask to see it, or if it's not visibly cracked, but it must be fixed, or I don't know, because I don't know a lot of my telescopes have want it.
I've bought a lot used. I will say I go off on reputation a lot with the sellers. So and specifically the Astromart, I will look for, you know, it's just like it's a much better environment than like eBay. You go to sellers who have 100% rating, who have thousands of sales, you feel a lot better about that, and you get a lot of better products. I've had maybe one or two shipments have an issue, but if you know somebody's you know stand-up person, they usually will talk to you, they'll work through it, whatever the case may be. So I would definitely just go off the reputation of the seller, and obviously you can inspect images, but their images, you know, the sales images, they always could be lovely on a focus. So.
Just a follow-up to that, do you not recommend getting anything off Craigslist, even if you could, I could see the telescope in person by looking at it, and if I would, what are some things to look out for? Because obviously I can't, if it's daylight, I can't really look at it.
You can't put it under a star test or something like that.
Yeah, are there questions I should ask, or do you recommend asking just to kind of narrow down whether or not it's the right scope, or
it's that, I mean, I feel like there's so much available on Astromart, I wouldn't go to Craigslist. But I don't know, you bought off
I
Craigslist
got
before.
actually that one. The base one is from worked out okay. You know, I think I would honestly just wherever you buy from, check if the things are really dirty, if it looks well maintained. I would generally agree, and check for the brand name, because okay, I'm going to assume that someone hasn't taken a really cheap telescope and put a Celestron label on it. I mean, I'm going to assume that's the case. So if it's a good brand and it looks like it's well taken care of, I think your chances are good.
Another question here?
What's the difference in viewing experience between like a really nice pair of binoculars, like a 10x50, versus like, you know, a pretty beginner friendly and cheap telescope?
So binoculars show you a wide field with low magnification. So you see a lot of the sky, but not a lot of detail in what you're looking at. A telescope will show you a very narrow field of view, but a lot more detail within that field of view. I think they complement one another really well. And even once you've got a telescope, I think most people keep using their binoculars. So it's not an either or thing. I think they're both really, really good ways to see the sky.
Can I add on to that? Or are you going to close out?
I got one more thought.
Oh, okay, great. So one thing that I would add to this is that with your binocular, because it's a wider view, you're not going to be on the hunt as much as you would be with a telescope. Because with a telescope, it is a smaller view. You're going to have to hunt around a little bit, and there's a bit of a thrill to it. So you kind of go to the Big Dipper, bounce around to the next constellation. You're like, I'm supposed to be somewhere between these two stars, kind of closer to this one, and then you start scanning around for whatever object it is you're looking
big, bright, you're going to see it. There's not a lot of hunting there. But that's where a lot of like the fun comes, I think, with the Dobsonian when you're kind of hunting around for things, you're star hopping, you're looking for something. Sometimes you're looking for something and you find something else by accident. You're kind of like, what is this? This looks like something, and it's this like fabulously named cluster. So I would say that's one thing that's a little bit different in the observing is that you have to hunt a bit more with any telescope really, unless you're getting something that's motorized where it's a smart or digital scope that you're telling it on the app, find me Andromeda's galaxy, and it does its own thing and gets it for you.
I'm going to short stop on the way to you. We're about to have demos here. We're going to wrap up very shortly. We're going to have demos here. So feel free to stick around and ask us questions. On mine, I'm going to be displaying the digital parts, so it'll have pre-recorded captures of, you'll be able to see things materialize through the digital eyepieces. But that's pre-recorded, of course, because we're inside. But passing on.
So this is aside from all of the specific choices about equipment. Human beings have been observing the night sky, the daytime sky too, for as long as we've been human. And it's really easy to get preoccupied with all of the technology. And these are important choices about what kind of tech you're going to use. But the most important thing is to get out there and have a relationship with the sky. I'm going to channel Dobson here a little bit, because we are part of the universe and the universe is part of us. But it's on us to maintain this relationship, and these are tools for doing that.
Okay, one more question.
With a telescope like that, I don't know if this was like 10-inch or whatever, does it have the same light capturing ability as like a 10-inch Dobsonian? Is that directly translatable?
Yes. I mean, whether it's a 10-inch refractor, 10-inch Dobbs, 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, it's going to have the same diameter, therefore light gathering power. But in terms of brightness, that's actually the ratio of, it's a ratio of diameter to focal length. So a Schmidt-Cassegrain probably has a longer focal length, therefore it won't be as bright of an image as a shorter Dobsonian of the same aperture. Okay. Let's just wrap up here. We're going to set up our demos, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you.